Russian police have arrested hundreds of people at nationwide protests in support of jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Observers say more than 400 protesters were arrested today in more than 50 cities around the country. The protests took place on the same day as President Vladimir Putin's annual State of the Nation address.
A forceful message delivered on a grand stage. At his annual State of the Nation address, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Western powers not to meddle in Moscow's affairs. We really don't want to burn any bridges. But if some mistake our good intentions for indifference or weakness and intend to burn or even blow up those bridges themselves, Russia's response will be even more forceful, quick and tough. In recent weeks, Russia has been building up its military presence on the Ukrainian border and in Crimea, pouring fuel on a simmering territorial conflict between Ukraine forces and pro-Russian separatists. This escalation was met with condemnation from abroad. But as he delivered his warning to the West, Putin was facing headwinds at home. Across the country, people gathered in protest at news of the deteriorating health of imprisoned opposition leader Alexei Navalny. A heavy police presence was supposed to deter those protests. A key aide to Navalny was snatched from the streets in Moscow and locked in a police van on the grounds of the Interior Ministry. I think that everything is happening to scare all the other people. I was detained for just thinking about showing up at the rally. I will be detained until the late evening in this police van. But you know perfectly well what you should do. You shouldn't be afraid. But the crackdown could not prevent protests even in far-flung parts of the country, like here in the remote Siberian city of Ulan-Ude. I came here purposefully to raise my voice against future and ongoing repressions, against the killing of Alexei Navalny in jail, against having many political prisoners. The rallies were met with mass arrests. As protesters were dragged into police vans one by one, politics in Putin's Russia increasingly looks like rule by force.
Well, for more now, I'm joined by Felix Light from the Moscow Times. Felix, it's good to have you on the program. I understand that you were at a pro-Alexei Navalny protest. Tell us, what did you see?
Yes, well, so the outlook among the protesters tonight, among the Navalny movement, was in some ways a little bit mournful, because after really dominating Russian politics, Russian opposition politics for some years now, the Navalny movement is facing some really serious legal penalties that will essentially criminalize any involvement with Navalny. Today's crowd was big, but it wasn't massive. It was certainly large for Moscow standards. We saw certainly perhaps north of 10,000 people on the streets of Moscow at least today. And it was a crowd of young people, of old people, of really sort of cutting across the coalition of Navalny's support. But there really was this recognition that this is perhaps the end of the line for sort of mass protest activity in Moscow for the time being.
Yeah, we hear that police detained hundreds of protesters. Can you confirm that? Did you see any of that happening?
I didn't personally see it myself, and in fact, though there are reliable reports of several hundred detentions today, this was almost rather restrained by the standards of Russian policing. Certainly in January, we saw really aggressive, sort of thoroughgoing policing, and in some cases really savage violence being meted out to protesters. Today we saw less of that, and that is perhaps a deliberate decision by the Kremlin to sort of take it a little bit easy now.
And what about the health of Alexei Navalny? The fact that we were hearing that he could die at any moment, what impact is that having on the opposition movement in Russia?
Well, certainly it spurred a lot of people to the streets today. You know, many people were saying that they were there specifically to protest what they call the killing of Navalny. And certainly we do know that Navalny's health is it's hanging by a thread, as one of his doctors has said. He's, of course, on a hunger strike. He's also recuperating from a poisoning by Novichok about 6 months ago. So there is a great deal of reason to be concerned about his health. Strangely, though, in an Instagram post, which was ferried out by his lawyers yesterday, he almost told people not to worry, saying that, you know, this potassium buildup, which his lawyers have flagged up as potentially causing cardiac arrest, is not to be worried about, and that he doesn't believe that he's on the brink of death. So we will see. We don't quite know what the state of his health is, and the information we're getting out of the prison is rather fragmentary.
Okay, correspondent Felix Light with the latest tonight from Moscow. Felix, thank you. Now, if Alexei Navalny were to die in prison, would there be consequences for the Kremlin? Manfred is leader of the center-right European People's Parliament, in the European Parliament. He says consequences without a doubt.
What we can do is to show to Vladimir Putin and to his whole system how high the price could be if things will go in a wrong direction. That is what we have to show. And that's why, for me, it's clear if Navalny will really, hopefully not, but if this really will happen, that he will die, then I think, for example, that Nord Stream 2 cannot be finished, cannot be finalized as a project. We have to tell Putin the price is high. Please respect international obligations and rules.
Yeah, clear words there from Mr. Putin. To talk about that, I'm joined now by Manuel Sarrazin. He is a member of Germany's opposition Green Party. He's the Greens spokesman on Eastern Europe policy, and he's a member of the German Parliament's Foreign Policy Committee. Mr. Sarrazin, it's good to have you on the program. To get us started, I'd like to read a quote from the chairman of the Foreign Policy Committee, Norbert Röttgen. He was quoted in the New York Times as saying, "However embarrassing it is for me, the Greens have the clearest stance of all the parties on China and Russia." And he also said the Greens are a much more realistic and preferable partner for us on foreign policy. Nice words for your party. So if the government asks you what it should do next about President Putin, what will your answer be?
Well, I think that what Mr. Putin is calling red lines is actually a red herring. It is clearly that he's trying to mobilize his population because he's under real criticism, and they have got elections in the autumn, and it's a real tough situation for this regime, for this system of Putin, because the people are running away of the system. So they're trying to mobilize, to hold their own population mobilized by creating a foreign enemy.
Do you think he's bluffing, though? I mean, we hear statements about all of these Russian soldiers amassing along the border with Ukraine. Is that a serious threat, or is Putin just bluffing?
It is for sure a serious threat. He's showing us a variety of options which they have in hand, from a fast escalation, where they're even putting the ideas of a grounding of it by helping so-called own passport holders in Ukraine. Also, he was telling today that it would be an asymmetrical response by Russia, which is nothing else than an escalation, which he's offering. On the other hand, it can be just also that they're trying to tactically swift the power balance in the Black Sea region. Anyway, whatever they're doing is a clear confrontation and a clear provocation, and I'm sure it will not just go far, they will go on with this.
Well, I want to imagine, let's say your party were to win the election and we have a Green chancellor, or we've got a Green foreign minister for Germany. What would that person, you, for example, be saying to Ukraine?
So it's clear, I mean, this is the German foreign policy, not only of the Green Party, of the whole government, that the territorial integrity of Ukraine cannot be questioned, that Germany is clear at the side of Ukraine and against the Russian interventional war, which is taking place in eastern Ukraine since 2014. But I think it's important that we have to be clear on the intentions and the interest of Russia as well. Russia is not seeking for peace in Ukraine. They're trying to create an image of themselves that they would be a negotiating party for creating peace, but actually they want to destabilize the country. So it is important to talk about the Kremlin as a destabilizing force and to try to connect with the Russian civil society and the population in the country better than before.
So it's the year 2021 and Russia is a destabilizing force in the world. I assume then that you think the Russian policy that has been pursued by German Chancellor Angela Merkel all these years, that policy has been a complete failure.
Well, let's say it that way. It has been, at some points, it was a clear stance. At other points, especially with the pipeline Nord Stream 2, the German policy towards Russia was actually not putting groundage on this position, but showing that if it's about economical interest, perhaps Germany might have a different opinion and is even splitting up Europe's interest. So it has to be Germany now seeking for more union in the European Union position towards Russia, and also for being more clear in stating what we see about the Russian policy internally against the civil society and opposition, and externally, for example, regarding Ukraine. This doesn't mean that the whole policy of the former government was a complete failure, but at least it was not clear enough.
And what about Nord Stream 2? Should that project be killed?
Yeah, I personally think it should be killed, but what the German government could at least do is saying that they are not politically supporting it anymore. If the Chancellor was saying that she doesn't support the project, this would be an important political stance, which would have also economical impact on the stock market's rating of a Gazprom company.
Let me just ask you before we run out of time, the protests in Russia over the imprisonment of Alexei Navalny, what did they say about Vladimir Putin, and how should Germany react to what's essentially a domestic Russian issue?
This is a domestic Russian issue, for sure, and we will not influence it. We cannot influence it. But as we are interested in the country, of course, we are really closely following and interested in what's happening in Russia. But one sentence more. If somebody is poisoned with internationally illegal substance of chemical warfare like Novichok, this is not an internal issue of any country anymore. It doesn't matter where it happens. If something like Novichok is used, it is in the same moment up to international law and in a national case, and no country can claim it's an internal issue.
Okay. Manuel Sarrazin, Foreign Affairs Specialist with Germany's Green Party. Mr. Sarrazin, it's good talking with you. We appreciate the time and the insights. Please come back and talk with us again.
Thank you. Have a good night.